I'd like to welcome speakers this afternoon from the Indian diaspora, rather than from just from India. They're going to speak on Indian perspectives on practice today, ceramic art practice. And the first speaker is Madhvi Subrahmanian. Madhvi I met in Singapore for the first time, and that's where she spends.
I live there.
Is living there. Sharbani Das Gupta will be the second speaker, and she also, they seem a peripatetic crowd. She divides her time between India and the United States. And Adil Writer, who, well, is everywhere it would seem, but is based in India, near Pondicherry. And they're also in an exhibition which I have been invited to be part of, and Jerry Wedd and Trevor Fry, where we exchanged works, made works, each of us made 6 works, and then exchanged them by mail or shipped them, and each of us then finished off the works of the others. And that's in an exhibition that will be on the tour, the walking tour, tomorrow. I'd like to now introduce Madhvi without any more ado to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I do anything about the lights or anything? Thank you, Janet, for the introduction. I hope you can hear me. The sound, everything all right? Oh, do you want me to wear this? Okay, can you hear me? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. So my talk today is traditions and transitions. So I'm very first of all, I want to say thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate being in Canberra and part of this wonderful triennale. My talk is called Traditions and Transitions, and I'm going to be talking about the clay practices in traditional clay practices in India, and then go into the contemporary practice, but mostly through my own process, my own artistic journey, because we have very little time. I can't talk about too many things. One doesn't really think about India in terms of ceramics. You usually think about China, because it's you don't. But India has a really large and varied clay tradition that has existed in continuum, and the pot and clay are an integral part of India's ritual and spiritual fabric. Clay traditions are predominantly in terracotta, and each part of India has its own specific tradition and forms. Shapes and styles are innumerable in both fired and unfired works, and forms stretch from functional to sculptural, from minuscule to gigantic, and from simple to ornate. Without doubt, clay and the pot are ever present in India and part of the Indian psyche. And there are many mythological origins to the potter and his craft. The prevalent myth in several parts of India is set in Satyug. Satyug is the time when God and men and human beings moved around freely. And the great god Shiva, who is also the destroyer, he wanted to get married to Parvati, who was the daughter of the Himalaya. But he couldn't get married because there wasn't an earthenware pot. So there wasn't a kumbha present. And he asked around all the gods and human beings present to help him make a pot, to bring a pot, to make a pot. And nobody really knew how to do this except a man who came up, and his name was Kulalak, and he came up and he offered his services, but he said, I have no tools. So Vishnu, the creator god, gave him his Sudarshan Chakra, which is his weapon and his instrument, his tool, and he puts this disc on a hillock, and that becomes a wheel. Then Shiva gives him his gotana, which is the pestle that he uses to grind his intoxicant, and to turn the wheel. He gives him his sacred thread to cut the pot of the wheel. He gives him his loin cloth to mop up the water. He gives him his little kamandalu, which is a pot that he carries as the water pot. And so he has all his tools. And then finally the creator god, Brahma, gives him his tortoise shell to scrape out the clay. So he has all his tools, and finally Parvati dusts her body and gives the clay to the potter, and therefore that's when the first pot is made, and that's when they could get married. So even today in Hindu weddings, stacked pots containing grains and holy water are present, representing fecundity and the cosmos. They stand at the four corners of the wedding mandapa, or the square in which the bride and the groom sit. So the potters believe to be direct descendants of Prajapati, or the creator god, and he's also known sometimes as Brahma, or Prajapati is also known as Brahma, the creator. There's another name that's very often associated with these gods is Vishwakarma, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda as the craftsman of people, and he is the Vedic deity that presides over procreation, all of us know how we start throwing on the potter's wheel. The very first form is the phallic form that you work with on the wheel. So it's not surprising that he would be connected with procreation. The clay in the pot is not only a symbol of fertility and procreation, but it is also used as a metaphor to repeatedly expressed by poets and philosophers to explain the eternal truth. Here we have, I just have a little poem by a poet from the 15th century, Kabir, who was claimed as both a Hindu and a Muslim poet, and he talks about repeatedly in several poems using the pot and the clay as a metaphor. And this one is very simple: one pot, one potter, one who is the creator of us all. The one wheel which has created so many forms, with one point in the center where the core dwells. So when the clay pot is referred to in India, it usually is always a round-bottomed pot, which is the cornerstone of every village in India. The porous terracotta pot allows the water to breathe. It sweats. It allows the water to breathe, keeping the temperature always cool inside. So the rounder the surface, the larger the rounder the pot, the larger the surface has to sweat, and therefore keeps the water really quite cool. So this round bottom pot has more references than just its functional form. The pot in itself is primarily the symbol of fertility, and it represents the human body as well. In Hindu tradition, gods and goddesses are invited to descend into this ghata, or the pot, during a ritual, and then they become the pot becomes the intermediary between the devotee and the deity during a certain ritual. The overflowing pot is called the Purna Ghata, or the complete, the pot that is filled with abundance. But the pot in itself also is important, as it symbolizes the void. You have the pot is used in several ways: empty, filled, or broken in rituals. That serves as a symbol that talks about the transition from one stage to the other. Now this is an image from a ritual that happened in my family, and here you can see the pot on your right is the pot that's filled with the holy water, and it represents fertility and prosperity, while the pot on the left, which has the leaves and the coconut on the top, that represents the cosmos. So these pots are very symbolic in the way they are used and how they are used. So clay itself, the potter and his role, and clay itself is sacred, as it holds the power to create and to destroy. The clay is both revered and feared. Clay contains within it the mulch of life, including ashes, sewage, refuge, and it can be contaminated if it's left in its untreated state. So therefore the potter is considered the power, he has the possessor of mystic powers, because he's an alchemist that converts earth purified by fire and smoke into a useful form. So he also becomes then the intermediary which uses these 5 elements. The 5 sacred elements are earth, fire, water, and air. So they're called the Pancha Mahabhutas, and these are harnessed by the potter. And earth is the base of all these 5 elements, which contains within it the other elements. So so conceptually, philosophically, clay and the potter's role is very highly elevated. And in terms of the social order, he is kind of outside the social order because he is kind of considered to be monopolized by his trade. But in caste hierarchy terms, he is very, very low on the totem pole. Now, traditional clay works all over India are done in earthenware, mostly earthenware, low fired. Again, it's really useful. Everything is done for a functional usage, for storage, cooking. They're really quite important for certain things. But the idea is the cycle of, it's very important that these pieces get discarded over time. That's because the cycle of discarding and replacing is what drives it drives the potter's economy, but more important, it keeps the well-being, health and well-being of the family. So in order to have this cycle to keep that going, it's part of certain rituals where, especially, for example, during an eclipse or death of the death in a family, these pots are usually thrown away and new ones are replaced. So you see clay pots like this widely used all over India. Women carrying water because they have to go. Water is not something that you get straight from a tap necessarily in far-flung villages in India. So very often you see women carrying these water pots from further they have to get water from the well or the river and things like that. So you see these scenes quite often. But with urbanization and with poor water management that we have been suffering through, water sources are getting driven further and further away for people, and it's become more and more challenging for them to get to use those earthenware pots that become quite heavy. So lighter plastic pots are replacing the earthenware pots, and also with the use of refrigeration, electricity, urbanization, like I said, water pots are getting are less prominent, have a less prominent position. As recently as about 15-20 years ago, we would have maybe counted about 1 million potters that were in 1 million traditional potters in India. But now that is fast changing, and as you can see in this kitchen, the pots, the earthenware pots are replaced by plastic pots. You cannot blame them because they're so heavy to carry, and the plastic is so much lighter to this thing. Now within the potters community themselves, they also have certain rules and things like that. One of the most predominant rule is that women are not allowed to work on the potter's wheel because they're considered to be unclean and they cannot touch the potter's wheel because of their menstrual cycle. But traditionally also, besides the contemporary situation, but traditionally women have managed to circumvent this rule. And I'll just show you a short clip of a film for you to see that. Oh my God, is there sound?
वो स्वयं चाक बन जाती है. जो मटका वो बना रही है वो एक स्टूल पे स्टेशनरी रहता है.
हिंदी it's okay.
और बॉटल खुद घूमती है, उसके चारों ओर गोल गोल घूमती है. एक गीली कपड़े की पट्टी वो हाथ में लिए रहती है. अपने 2 हाथों से मिट्टी को दबाते हुए वो बहुत ही रिदमिकली गोल गोल घूमती है.
So in this case, you can see how the potter she becomes the wheel herself. She goes around that system. And then, but women are also sometimes allowed to touch the potter's wheel, especially like in this case where this woman in the yellow sari is getting married, and just before her wedding, she does something called Chak Puja, which is the prayer to the wheel. And here she prays for prosperity and well-being in her marriage. And the potter, who's on the right-hand side, becomes the kind of like the intermediary for her prayers, and he allows her to worship the wheel. So that's, we have other in Tamil Nadu. This is in Pudukkottai in Tamil Nadu. Also here, the potter plays the role of the priest. So he's a potter and a priest, and he makes these 16 to 20 feet high horses that are offered to God Ayanar. Horse is, for its virility, strength, and speed, has a special place in Indian myths and stories, and it's the horse form in terracotta that you see in many, many parts of India. And in Tamil Nadu, these large horses of 16 to 20 feet are about the highest, largest terracotta sculptures anywhere in the world. Now, these are offered to the gods either collectively, or a single patron gets these commissions the potter to make these horses, and then there is a ritual, and then the horse is left in the premises of the temple to basically go through the cycle of death and basically disintegration, and it's really about impermanence and transience of life. So today there are only a couple of potters who really work in that scale and in terracotta. But most of the villages, outside most villages in Tamil Nadu, you will see these large horses. They're made in cement now because of their more permanent nature. But the tradition has changed, but is very much alive in a sense of what its purpose is. So where do I fit in as a contemporary ceramist in this magical, modern, magical, amazing world of Indian ceramics, traditional ceramics? So I come from a city called Mumbai, which is a very, very crowded city, about 17 million people, and it's a huge landmass, huge human crush on a small landmass. And in the middle of this, in the middle of this city, there is the largest slum in Asia, which is called Dharavi, and Kevin talked about it this morning. And in this is a very big, thriving pottery community, and they make things for functional stuff for diyas for during Diwali, the festival of lights. These are yogurt pots. But my journey didn't start here. My journey started in Pondicherry with an American couple called Ray Meeker and Deborah Smith, and they have been there for over 40 years and making work in Japanese desk style. But again, I'm not going to talk much about this because my colleague Adil is going to talk a bit about Pondicherry. I'm going to talk about where my journey, like many of my peers and a lot of contemporary artists, started in a place like Pondicherry, in Golden Bridge Pottery, where it's a production pottery, and we learned to make pots from the inside out. By that I mean learned how to make my own clay, build kilns, etc. And this was from about the early 1980s. By today, the contemporary ceramic movement is very strong and has taken and has many followers and a lot of patrons. I went off to the US and did my master's, and where I got a chance to explore and experiment not just the functional but the sculptural, the vessel genre, the installation, conceptual work, etc. So I had a chance to study with really wonderful artists from Warren McKenzie, Val Cushing, Peter Biseca, and I was pushing my boundaries and working in hand building and conceptual thoughts of what is a vessel that I was creating. But it wasn't before long that I realized I really wanted to go back to Dharavi, to those potters, and learn how to make the round-bottomed pot. And here I am in Dharavi working on that. And here are some of the images of that working with round bottom pots, aligning myself to the rural potter, working with terra sigillatas, and also thinking more conceptually in terms of what the clay connects with, that whole connection with fertility and form. In 2002, I had an opportunity to work in a collaborative project with 3 other artists, and this was Anjani Khanna, Vineet Kakkar, and Amrita Dhawan. And we decided to make these very large works, which were about close to 7 feet high, and they were interactive, and we placed them very bravely on a pavement in that very, very busy city like Mumbai. And the idea was really to get that point of pause, to get people to just stop for a second, touch it, feel it, rotate this clay. And it was really exciting to see people of all class orders, interact, be interested. There was always this fear of putting ceramic out into the open of what would happen with a place like India, with such an exciting street life. There's so much all the time happening on the street. It's really an extension of your private space. And you find things like this. So for me, the streets, the highways, the roads are very interesting because you find shrines like this, under a tree which has a little rock or a little things becomes a shrine. The roadside rock has a very uncanny way in India to become at once a direction giver, or it becomes a marker or a deity. So I wanted to continue working in large scale like I had done, and I got the opportunity to go back to Golden Bridge and work there as artist in resident. And so working on large pieces that were raw glazed and fired in a wood kiln at Cone 10, which had that reference to those amorphous rocks, was very interesting. 2 years ago, as Adil had talked about this morning, we went to Fuping in China, and there were 18 of us in the same space working, and it was very exciting to work in the factory in China. Several artists from Australia have been there, and you probably know about this place. It's a brick factory, and they make these bricks 24/7, and we had access to all the material at that, whatever we wanted. I took the brick for myself as my material and my point of inspiration. I sliced it as like bread slices, and then I built these very deconstructed those bricks and reconstructed them into these abstract lingam-esque forms that was sort of known and kind of unknown as well. With these forms, I was questioning and wondering whether we were really leaving behind in our mad pursuit of development, what we were leaving behind. Will we lose the gods and goddesses enshrined in the amorphous rocks and trees? Will we move further and further away from our connection with nature and earth? But with this image of the Ayudha Puja, the puja of the tools, it reassures me, because this puja is performed in front of an anagama kiln in a contemporary studio, and everything in this world is like the terracotta horses, about impermanence and transience, and some traditions we will lose, some will change, but I just believe that we as potters will always be linked to Prajapati, that god of creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madhvi. Next speaker is Sharbani Das Gupta, who will be talking here. The image makers of Kumatuli.
taking a deep breath. I did this photo documentary on the image makers about 3-4 years ago, and at that time it gave me an opportunity to also examine my own role as a ceramic artist coming out of India. I don't consider myself very traditional. I'm not very religious. I'm probably agnostic. But these images and doing this documentary really brought up my own connection to the country. So we're talking about what modern ceramic artists do. So I tried to figure out where I fitted into this whole thing. And Madhvi's already referred very much to how the forces of nature are very much part of our mythology, and it's all around us. You grow up hearing these stories, you go to the pujas. Puja actually means a religious festival, really, and it does affect you in some way. So, yeah. Is it this one?
Yeah. It's the computer.
Oh, okay. Water plays a big role in India, and many of our ceremonies are surrounded around the power of water. It's something that now that I live in this, the desert area of New Mexico, it seems to be playing a bigger and bigger part of the pieces that I make as well. And this particular piece on the right is called Lifeline. I think it comes from having grown up with this awareness of how important nature is. Nature is represented in our gods, in our myths. They are personified as beings, and then we tell their stories. So the other way that I'm influenced by this whole thing is this aspect of telling a story through what I make. This was a piece called Dinner with King Midas, and it's a reference to our food production systems, which I thought parallels very well with the story of Midas. And I staged it in this old abandoned ice factory in Roswell, and then later collaborated with another ceramic artist to stage this in New York. This year at Ensika, I showed these pieces, and again, it's in reference to a story I read about the standard kilogram, which is a weight that's kept in Paris under 2 bell jars, is slowly losing mass. So that immediately triggered my whole, and they can't explain why it's happening. So it triggered, this mystic side of one. I think you just are more in touch with that if you grow up in India. You don't have a choice about that, actually. So this is called Gravitas. And then we come back to the story of water. This is a piece called An Abacus. I'm interested in how we have the hubris to think that we can ascribe a value to something like, the natural world and say who gets what. And this is a larger version of the same abacus. Again, I showed it at Ensika this year. So that's my work. Water actually is how the British also came to India. And I grew up in this city, well, most of my adults, they call Calcutta. It's like Bombay, 15 million people live there. It was chosen by the British because of its proximity to the Bay of Bengal and also, therefore, a good port. This is an image taken while the British were still in Calcutta, and this is kind of around the same area, but a few years ago. So it's much more crowded than it is now. This colonial past is there all around us, and it's a crazy city. It never stops, except at this one time of the year, and it's when we celebrate the festival of Durga. The goddess Durga, ironically, Madhvi talked about how women have a lower role and they're not allowed to touch the potter's wheel, etc., etc. But this particular story is about how there's this demon who's acquired powers and is threatening all 3 worlds, hell, earth, and heaven. And he has the gift of being invincible. No man, animal, or God can kill him. So what they did was all the gods combined their powers and created Durga. So she's a woman, and she's the one who then finally gets him. This image is made by the potters of Bengal, and they used to come in seasonally to do this, but now they live in this very cramped and dark area. Their studios pour out onto the street. They use the street for their bamboo structures, and the images dry on the street, as you can see. These images are not fired. They're kept unfired and terracotta rather than terracotta, and then they're decorated and used in the festival. Every space is used, and it's the time that they make it is also the monsoons, and so they use plastic sheets everywhere, and sometimes even an umbrella to stop rain from coming in. I love this image. I used it as my computer background for a while. But yeah, it's a photographer's delight. You really cannot go wrong here. You know, there's so much light and shadow, and these shapes are so amazing. You know, everywhere you look, you have these images from tiny to really large. In one small little background room, room off the side, I spotted this image, and I took a picture of it. It's actually not of Durga, it's of another goddess, Kali, and she's usually shown with her foot on the body of Shiva. Shiva is her husband there. And he lies in her way to stop her because she's in a rage. And he lies there, and when she puts her foot on him, she realizes what she's done, and she sticks her tongue out. So she's always shown with her tongue out. But in this one, as you can see, she's kneeling on him, and I couldn't get the potter to explain to me why. I presume it's something to do with Tantricism. So the profession is kept within the family, usually passed down from father to son, but it's less and less lucrative, and so the sons are not doing it anymore. So now they have little village kids coming from outside who are learning the profession and carrying on. But it really doesn't pay enough, even though, they get orders from private families, from social clubs, and even from Indians living abroad, expatriates who order these and get them taken across. But the demand is getting less, and it just isn't enough to sustain them. So this is under threat to some extent as well. All the potters know every stage of it, even though it's somewhat divided, the work. They start with making a basic background like that in bamboo, and then they make an, I'll go back, because I like this picture. He's making an armature in straw, and then the entire thing is mounted and pegged to that background, the plinth, the bamboo plinth at the back. And at this stage, the potter has to make his final decisions about the composition, because once the clay comes on, it can't be moved around. The clay is sort of brought in on these wheelbarrow things from the river, the Ganges, and it's mixed with straw and also with, I found out, with a handful of dust from a prostitute's home. And I asked my mother what that was about, and she said, oh, it's to show the all-encompassing love of the goddess Durga, that everybody is, equal in her eyes. So, and it's mixed, and that year when I was doing this photography, there was an argument because the prostitutes were saying that they weren't given enough respect, and so they weren't going to give them the dust. I guess, I don't know. They managed to sort it out. Then the clay is made into a slurry, and the images are coated, and they're coated in several layers. Each layer is allowed to dry. They're kept up like this, with strings, and until they dry, then they put another layer. The backs are kind of kept sort of uncoated because they're preserving the clay. This piece is, to give you an idea of scale, this one is more than 15 feet tall. Where I was standing was near the shoulder of the lion. My head is near the shoulder of that lion. And that was just quite beautiful. Once the clay is dry, then they smooth it down with water and they let it dry again. And then it'll crack, but then they patch the cracks with a sort of a sandy mixture. I was amazed by, these are untrained artists, really. I mean, untrained formally. But there's sense of form. I mean, it's almost like Greek sculpture, not the lion, the guy. But you know, the stance is very Indian. The sort of the hip out, and it's a very Indian gesture and stance. The older, more traditional goddesses had a triangular face. They weren't quite as realistic. Then once the face is made, then they coil build the backs of the heads, and then they're left to dry on the streets. The expression is really important. This is the demon, and here's the goddess. She looks serene no matter what she's doing. You know, she's killing that guy, but she's absolutely serene. I got tired of turning my head and trying to see what they look like, so I flipped the slide to see what the faces look like. But anyway, once the heads are ready, they're put on the bodies with a dowel, and then they're coated with clay again. The hands are solid, and then put on with dowels at the ends of the arms. Again, just look at that form. I mean, I can't do that myself. It's so beautiful. And then just before they go into the painting stage, the limbs are wrapped with this thin linen which is dipped in slip, and then it's smoothed down. The finishing is done with great care. You know, watching this man work was sort of like watching a dance almost, you know, just the way he was working with this image. Once they're all dry, they're actually dried. I didn't get a picture of that, but they put these hot charcoals on the body to dry them out faster. Then they go into painting them. They use tempera paints, and they coat it with a white base before adding color. Each god has a different skin tone. For example, Saraswati, the goddess of learning, has a golden tone. The goddess Parvati has, Lakshmi has a white skin. And, you know, some of the darker skinned gods are shown with blue and green. You know, when you step behind and the paint starts coming on, it begins to feel less like clay, of course. And I kind of miss the clay aspect of it, but I do see they seem to gain in power and symbolism. Once they paint it, they start putting the clothes on, and you know, they have all kinds of ways of putting on the saris and different aesthetic sort of considerations. But this is the final step, and they don't usually allow outsiders to see this, the painting of the eyes. Because once the eyes are painted, the image is sentient, and you're not supposed to see it until it's consecrated. This one has a very multicolored outfit, but they also, you know, then they have separate artists who do the jewelry, do the backgrounds, do the shrines that are made in cloth. They're temporary shrines. This one is made with the pith of a plant. It's a white pith. And then they're consecrated by fire, and then the city celebrates for 10 days. Everybody gets new clothes, we all go out and eat, and it's sort of like a Mardi Gras kind of thing, but without the excesses of the Mardi Gras. I don't know. There are competitions for the shrines. They're temporary shrines. They're built up, they block off streets and they build them with cloth and bamboo. And then, you know, they have various themes. This one was a Tibetan theme one year. At the end, after the 10 days, the goddesses sort of bathe, and then the women put this red powder on each other, the sindoor. And it's a time of celebration because the goddess is going back home. She's taken in a procession like this to the river where she will be immersed. And the idea, that's the reason that they are not fired, because, you know, as they sink down, they just go back to the river. It's a comment on the cyclical nature of life, and as the year rolls around, she will be remade. I asked the potters how they felt about it, and they apparently don't go to watch this because it is painful for them to watch it happening. You spend 3-4 months making something and then you put it in the river. It's a bit difficult. Swami Vivekananda, who was a Hindu philosopher in the 19th century, had this comment to make. He said, a Hindu does not worship an idol made of wood and clay. He sees consciousness within the earthenness and then loses himself in it. Because as a child, I wished my parents would let me do this, get in the water and recover all those fabulous jewels and things that they all got. But, anyway. So this is, I thought that it's such a powerful part of our growing up, and I felt very fortunate that they allowed me to do this documentary. So, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Sharbani. If it was a privilege for you to share that experience with those potters, it's a privilege for us to have shared it with you. So thank you for that. The final speaker in this panel, Adil Writer. Well, here he is. Okay. Thank you, Adil.
Hi. After these kind of Indian tours, I'm taking you to Oroville and Pondicherry, where a quiet revolution, more or less, started in the 70s, and today it's a fledgling ceramic center in India. I live in Oroville. This is international community of about 2,500 people from over 100 countries, living in a forest. We are hippies. This is our center. This is a sort of, we call it the Matri Mandir. We live on mud roads. It's a quieter kind of life from the hustle and bustle of Bombay that I grew up in. Adjacent to Oroville is Pondicherry, which is the last place where the colonial rulers left India. The French were here even post-independence. Pondi is a small beach sort of town. Still retains some part of it, is the French Quarter, which retains Franco-Tamil architecture. We still have these kind of names. It's based around the Sri Aurobindo ashram here. And in Pondi is the Golden Bridge pottery, started by Ray Meeker and Deborah Smith in the early 70s. All of us are students from there. And I'm privileged to be living in Oroville so close to this because I consider this home. Because of the course I came and did here in 1998, and because of how Ray and Deborah make you part of their family, that we are all so connected with clay. This is the Chinnagama, which is a smaller version of the Anagama that we have, that we fire. Some images of Golden Bridge pottery. These are Ray's rejects. He does very large sculptures. The student area, you saw probably one of the earlier photographs was one of the first batches. This is last year. And unfortunately, Ray is actually stopping taking students from next year. We are all a little worried about that because none of us want to take this on. This is Deborah's side. Deborah does the functional work. She's trained in Japan. Very clean aesthetic. She hand paints every pot herself. That was a student kiln. This is the Carla, which is the large car kiln. This is all wood firing. The focus is on wheel throwing and wood firing. Everybody gets to make their own clay. Nothing is ready-made. Glazes are made, clays are made. Everything you want has to be made from scratch. This is some of our production work that I stuck this one into an anagama. She didn't want me to, but it's all cone 10 high fire stonework. Ray makes big kilns because he's a big guy, so this is like a 120 cubic foot kiln. He turned 71 last year. In India, we have this, I'm 70, running 71. So that's the title of his show in Delhi. These were 71 Thibaults. This is a Hyatt project, which I will come to a little later on. This is all Ray's work, a couple of shows, earlier shows. So this is the kind of background and training and the thing that we are subjected to throughout the time we are at Golden Bridge. Ray is also known for his fired houses. This is making houses out of mud bricks, unfired, loading it with product inside and firing the whole thing, something like what I did in Galgaon. These are houses that have been built in the 80s, 90s, and people are living in there. Extremely tropical, almost like air conditioned inside. He doesn't do it anymore. It's just too labor intensive. Golden Bridge hosts international potters often. Susan Peterson actually started this long back in 1997. Betty Goodwin, Mike Dodd, Sandy Brown. Sandy was a huge influence on me. She came in the second year of my studies and she was breaking all the rules and I was so happy. Jeff Shapiro. In the middle here is Dr. Kuba, who is our single best, most prolific ceramic buyer. He has a huge collection of not just Indian, international ceramics, and he's a dermatologist. Every time he takes off a pimple from someone, he goes and buys a pot. Jack Troy. So after every workshop, you'll see some figures sitting here who are here. After every workshop, we go for what is called the cool tour. As the Anagama is cooling, we go and visit these INR horses that Madhvi showed us. Oops, sorry. This is the one of the last potters who makes these large horses. He's a dying tribe because his son is now into computers and he doesn't do it anymore. But Palanisamy comes over to our studio and once in a while makes things if we want him to. That's the Jack Troy workshop. Stuart's here. Stuart's here. That's in my studio. Take you through a tour of Auroville and Pondicherry, because what's happened is, like Michel was one of the first students that Ray took on in the 80s. He has a very huge, large studio, very big practice. Again, the same principles: making your own clay, making your own pots, making your own glazes, gas firing, wood firing. 80% of the work is production work. Functional tableware everybody is buying in India today, and that's good because it keeps us going into exhibition mode. Ange is a German who came to India and when she was 4 years old. She has her own studio. She does this kind of work in porcelain and stoneware. Antara Sinha, she's in Pondicherry. She has a studio next to Golden Bridge. This was the large piece that she was making for the Hyatt project, which you will see. Anamika is my partner at the pottery studio. She's from Holland. She's been in India 30 years. This is her exhibition work. Rakhi in Auroville. I'm showing you contemporary work and then I'll be taking you into village potteries. Ruthann Tarbol came over on an invite from us in February this year. We hosted the first soda conference in Auroville, Rakhi and myself. This was in Rakhi's studio. And since then I've been so smitten, I changed my wood kiln into a soda kiln. Ashwini Bhatt has a small studio in Auroville too. She's currently showing in the US. So this is Sami. This was a time when somebody in the Auroville area wanted a large Ganesha to be made, and I cannot do anything close to this. So we called him over. He was working in my studio. He was working with stoneware for the first time. He's used to working with terracotta, and he had a really hard time here. Body parts were just falling off because he could not handle this kind of clay. Very frustrating, but finally he made 3 Ganeshas and they fired very well. These are village potters around who have trained earlier in Golden Bridge or other Auroville studios and started their own. We have a huge number of clients from India and abroad coming down to source out handmade ceramics, functional ware, and everybody's making pots and everybody's getting huge orders. Especially these village potters can actually take on much larger projects than we do, because I don't want to do 5,000 cups for one client with the same glaze, you know, and these guys are happy to do it. And right across there would be somebody doing terracotta, very traditional stuff, again for the export market. This is just local clay dug up from here. This is Purushottam. He is the single largest village potter around. He doesn't hesitate in taking somebody else's sample that a client gets him and make it for you 5 rupees less. And he says, I get an order, I do it for you. You know, it's like that. This is an oil kiln that he's using. He's the only one firing oil. A lot of the terracotta is actually for festive times of the year. Rest of the year, they make cement pots, planters. This is Loganathan. He has been adopted by my studio because we didn't want to get any larger than we are. We are only 7 of us working in a studio. And he was a 2-person pottery, but he's an excellent thrower. So we took him on, and he makes things for us with our models. Sometimes I go and do my own thing. These were pots I'd seen in Korea, which I went over to his place and made with his people. And it's a kind of subcontracting. Jaishankar is a fabulous thrower. And it's a kind of give and take. He gives us mostly everything bisque, and we fire it our way. This is the Hyatt project. The Hyatt in Chennai wanted a sculpture garden, and Ray was one of the curators for that, to select some people. This was his piece at the Hyatt downstairs, called The Passage. This is the 3rd floor, the pool deck level, and there's ceramic stuff scattered all around. These are my boxes, the treasure boxes in the landscape here. Next to it there is Michelle's piece in the water. It was the first time an Indian client has actually gone and commissioned such large ceramic works within India. That's Sharbani at Golden Bridge making this. This is Antras Tetrax. This is Aarti Veer. She was commissioned to make these. Ashwini Bhatt firing her Harappan goddess forms. Ending with what you're going to see tomorrow as the collaborative show that I talked about earlier. These are some images that I stuck into the firing of everybody's works, and they've been all sodaed. I had no idea what this was. It's supposed to be something extremely Australian. I had no idea what voodoo piece she had sent me. So this is the original piece. This is the original piece, which was the inspiration, which is taken out at festival times. And this is what I made out of it for the exhibition. And this is the piece, that's a contemporary version of it in the delegate show. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adil. The speakers are happy to take questions now. If anybody has any questions, I have one to go, but you in the audience may well have questions because we've covered a lot of area, looking at both contemporary practice, collaborative practice, cross-cultural practice, historic and traditional, transitioning into contemporary practice. It seems to be a lot about transitions. Yeah. So perhaps you might like to move to the front here, and we could have the lights up, could we? Or
Sure.
sit, good boy, sit.
See that?
Okay. My
Yes.
name's Jackie. I'm really intrigued with your really large forms. I love the enormous forms.
Jackie, maybe you might stand up, and could you ask your question sort of maybe looking half, to the room?
I'm really intrigued with the horses. The idea that you can fire a whole house is absolutely fabulous. And I'm wondering why. I mean, I know there's a sort of a tradition of the disintegrating, but just particularly if people are stopping to make them now, I'm just wondering why you're not firing these large sculptural pieces.
The horses are fired.
Oh, the horses are fired.
Yeah.
Oh,
The horses are terracotta, they're no fire, and they slowly disintegrate over time.
yeah.
Those old
Because,
horses,
yeah. But there, you have other things, like a lot of the ones that will go into the
Yeah, the
water.
goddess images are not fired.
All right.
And that's kind of part of the concept that it's a cycle, and there's, we believe in birth, regeneration, death, and so it just embodies that. But the horses are fired.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
those images you saw of her horses are like decades old, disintegrating.
Some of them are
Yeah.
Today they have cement horses, and the offering is, earlier it was, if you do this for me, God, I'll give you a horse. Now it is, if you do it for me, God, I'll paint the horse for you. It's crazy. They paint them. Every time they want to give an offering, they paint
They
them.
repaint
Yeah,
it.
they repaint it.
I have a fact to add to
Could you stand up and ask your questions more generally?
just a fact to add to Sharbani's comment. He's saying about the first clay that comes for the Ma Durga statues from the threshold of the prostitute zones. I believe it's because every time when they walk into a prostitute zone, they leave all their virtues.
So I was still,
and that's why it's
so
the most auspicious clay, and that's what's used for the goddess.
It's very virtue filled.
I was actually given that explanation, but when I asked my mother, she said she gave me
like
this
that,
one,
is it?
and I prefer it. That's how I use that one.
Sharon, I've got a question,
Yes.
please. I was fascinated with the mention that Kevin made earlier this morning with reference to the chai cups that you made, and you were talking about the disposability, the dust to dust theme of traditional wear, which I'm very saddened to see disappear over time. I read somewhere that that the potters obviously made the chai cups, they're disposable, they get crushed, and then these were replaced by plastic ones.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard then that this was such a disaster in terms of rubbish, rather than them going back into the ground, that there was such a problem with, being non-disposable. Are they being remade now, the traditional way?
Yeah, there was a movement where they did start making these cups. I don't know if it lasted. I don't know what the current situation is. There was a minister in India that took this on, and
The railway minister started
he
this.
started this, and
But I
but
just
I'm
came
not
from.
sure if it's still.
I just come from Calcutta, and outside my home on the sidewalk, there's this man who makes tea, and he's still selling them in the little terracotta cups. which get thrown away. But Bengal, where I come from, is also known for this special kind of yogurt that is made in these terracotta, and the terracotta actually imparts a flavor. And I was sad to see this time that it's being sold in plastic, and the sweets are being sold in plastic.
Yeah.
So it really upset me when I saw that. I couldn't have it, actually.
Because it's that whole sense of the terroir, you know, the clay does impart the coolness and
But this is all very romantic about this chai cup being sold on the Indian railways, but if you can imagine the millions of people going up and down India and all getting terracotta pots and then chucking them on the tracks, if it's plastic, they just throw it on the tracks and it's plastic all through the country.
Yeah.
So this railway minister decided to come back to this, but it didn't last long because they didn't have enough people to supply that sort of quantity that they need.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You used a different term for the clay that was used for the immersion. You said it wasn't terracotta, it was terra.
No, when it's not fired, they call it terra cruda.
How do you spell that?
C-R-U-D-A.
Thank you.
T-E-R-R-A, C-R-U-D-A.
And does that mean unfired?
Unfired, yes.
Uncooked, like ham.
Yes, well, it's clear from your own stories that in terms of developing ceramics as an art form in India, that it's very important to go out of India and to find places to exhibit your work and so on. And I'm interested to know what you think about the state of ceramic art in India. Where are the areas that have potential? Are there particular places, galleries that are finding collectors? Where do you see, are there associations that can develop, maybe that can form linkages with associations here? Are there events, proto-biennales emerging?
I think it's still emerging over there. But Adil would know more.
Even I was in Sasama in Japan a couple of years back, 3 years back, and there was this international group show in some museum later. And out of all these beautiful things there, 2 little pots had sold, and everybody was celebrating. I was telling them, we bring this show to India, even before the opening night, half of it will be red with red dots. It will be sold. So they all wanted to come to India, which we over the last couple of years managed, and they came to Delhi, and they all almost sold out. So it's heartening to know that in India, people are still buying exhibition pottery, ceramics. There's a culture of people buying stuff. Of course, this person I showed you is the most prolific. If he doesn't come to an opening and there are not the first few dots around, the whole show actually dies. Because people say that Dr. Kuba has bought something, so then they start buying. But it's still, I think, from what I hear in the rest of the world, it's still a very good market for ceramics in India. And there's always a good thing to have collaborative shows, because that brings in more people. And it's not just for the ceramic community that comes and sees the shows. Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, the big cities, they have this thing of people coming and seeing ceramic shows. They like it. Just a common person, not necessarily connected to clay. It's very good for us now.
Could you talk a bit more about the enthusiasm for domestic wear, like all the orders that you're getting at Red?
It's fabulous.
And that's Indian clients.
We get clients coming to us, almost a new client coming to us every week in my studio. And we have to send them to other people because there's so many people doing this. But because of that, every studio has developed its own aesthetic and its own look and glaze. Like, we are known for happy glazing, whatever that is. Some client called it that and we stuck to that. Next to me, Michelle is known for extremely beautiful, simple, clean forms and glazes, things like that. Golden Bridge, Deborah is known for her painted work.
So are these design shops or department stores? Who are the clients?
No, these are the small boutiques in the smaller stores.
Right.
I don't like to go to something like Fab India, which is like a large national sort of thing, because they come to you and they take, every year they take about a large number of samples. They buy them from me. I don't give them free. And after 3 months, they come to us with the most boring, simple thing in that whole lot, and they want 5,000 of that exactly the same.
Right.
So I stopped dealing with it.
Yes.
Because there are enough people coming and giving us a full payment, 100% payment, pre-starting the order, and taking it but smaller quantities. And it's
So does that then become a potential source of employment for traditional potters who have the skills to make?
We try to bring in the terracotta potters, but they work very differently. They work on these different wheels and all, so they don't. But they quickly adapt to the electric wheel, and they become extremely skilled. And then they start their own studio. And I know that my pots are being bought from the Audible boutique.
Yes.
Somebody takes one pot, gives it to the local potter, and he makes it his way.
Yes.
There may be a little difference in the quality, but only we understand that. Maybe the client doesn't understand that.
Yes.
And it's okay with me. Like yesterday somebody was saying, you know, somebody's copying my work. Exactly. You copy the work, you make a new model. Forget it. Right?
Are there any other questions? What I would like to know is, obviously the traditional potters who come and work, like the fellow who's working for you in Oroville, they have adapted because this is a source of employment, and it's a very much journeyman approach to making rather than an artist. What do they think about the artists? Do they think they're weird, or do they see them as a kind of a conduit to a continued source of income? Or, I mean, what's the reverse relationship? I can see how you as artists feel about traditional potters and sculptors, but
I don't think they're very emotional about it. They just see you as a means for an income.
Yes, yeah.
And when I went back to Golden Bridge to Bengal, I worked with the Crafts Council to work with village potters, trying to find, and they wanted to work in terracotta, so we were working with planters and things like that. It's interesting because, again, women don't touch the wheel, right? But I learned how to use that low wheel of theirs, and they let me work with it. So I think they almost see you as separate, not in their social environment. So it's
so therefore not subject to the same restrictions and the same. Yes.
I just want to add something to that. The women not touching the potter's wheel, they do everything else.
Yes.
The hardest, most difficult work of fetching the clay, preparing the clay, selling the pots, carrying the pots, putting them in the kiln, but they don't do two things, is touching the wheel and lighting the fire. Other than that, they do everything.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Also, this intrigues me a lot, but I have two comments to do with a woman and wheel. First is 30 or more years ago, I was in Africa working 2.5 years in Rwanda, and we introduced some, beside the local traditional skills, we introduced some wheels. And the traditional making was by women, and as soon as we introduced the tool, it has been kept by the men. Just in information. And the second point, which has interest for me also, is there is a myth of origin from Egypt, which is Khnum, the god Khnum. You may know this story. Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay, do you want me to tell this story?
Yes,
I will
please.
make it short.
Can you stand up and tell the story, Jack? Stand up and tell the story.
Sorry. So my wife is a storyteller. I will not do it as a storyteller, but just the story itself. So in the very ancient time, at the beginning of the world, there was nothing, only Khnum, who was a god. He was like a goat, I think, and he was very alone. So he decided to create everything from something, a little mud from behind his knees, and he created the stars, and the world, the sun, the moon, and the mountains, the rivers, and everything, the trees. And it happened that still he was very alone. So he made the animals, but still he was very alone. So then one day he had the idea, so we'll see how close it is from the Bible, but we all know. So he has the idea to create a man, but he didn't make it this way. It was more difficult to do than all the other things of man, you know. So man first, which is he take he take his wheel, because he had a wheel, and he throw every part of the man: the hair, the eyes, the skin, the bones, the heart to have some feeling, the souls who have some spirit, and the blood and everything. And all the spare parts were around him. He put them together, and it was the first man. And when he looked at the first man didn't say thank you. He was sad, alone. So Knum already know what was the story about being alone. So he go back to the wheel, but now he has experience, skills. So he throw the hair much finer and longer. And then he make the eyes more delicate and deep and everything. And everything, the bones more fine and resistant, the heart more wide, the soul more huge. And experience, that's experience, you know. And when, the end is interesting. When all the spare parts were displayed around, he put all together the first woman was there. And the woman didn't look at him, Knum, the god, he looked at the man, and the man looked, and so Knum said, oh, this is a good job, they don't need me anymore. And then he went to the woman, he said, now it's your turn to throw. He take the wheel, put into the belly of the woman, and that's how all things begin. So maybe the fact is, women in India, maybe, I try to have a hypothesis, is maybe they don't touch the wheel because they are the wheel. I don't know.
One more question.
More of a comment adding to the today. Brunesh, who has just left, is actually a bridge between the traditional potters and contemporary culture. He's actually demonstrating tomorrow making the water pots. So part of the demonstration program.
With Australian clay?
Sorry?
With Australian clay?
Is he making the round bottom pot?
Yeah,
sorry?
Round bottom pot.
Yes. Vodka. And from my observations, there are lots of pots still making sure you can still get them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we need to wind up now. I'd like to thank very much our three speakers this afternoon for what was a most insightful and broad-ranging series of talks. Just before everybody goes, there's 3 items of housekeeping. The first one is that there's the bus tour tonight, the bus trip to openings. There are quite a few openings on tonight. They are all on between 6 and 9 p.m. They are all on the south side of the lake. The buses will be going to the south side of the lake, but they will not be going to every gallery. So I wanted to draw your attention to this sheet, which you will have got in your show bags, and those galleries that have the dark green colour are all the ones that are having openings tonight, Thursday night. So only 2 of them are actually on the bus trip, but then you can fairly easily make your way either by pooled taxis or some of them by walking to other venues. There are also a large number of eating places, particularly in Manica. Built Gallery is actually in Griffith, and that's really close to Manica, and Kingston is a very good eating area as well. So there are a number of places where you could, after you've been to gallery openings or in between, actually get sustenance. So could I draw your attention to the galleries that are opening tonight? M16, Built Gallery, which has got an exhibition of miniature ceramics. Megalo Print Studios is having, not surprisingly, print on clay exhibition opening tonight. Beaver Galleries has got 2 exhibitions opening tonight in the one gallery. M16 Art Space has also got more than one. I can't find the second one now, but I think there were 2 exhibitions opening there. There's Anne-Marie Jackson, and I'm sure there was a second one there. But three at M16. Okay. But could I suggest that you actually, just look at this, and there is a broad map of the city here, which gives you the numbers that relate to the galleries, so that you can actually plan where you go. Is that okay?
Which one is the bus going to?
The bus is going to M16 and to Beaver Gallery. Yeah, M16 and Beaver, so then you get 5 exhibitions with one bus trip.
And where's it leaving from?
And it leaves from out the front of the school.
At what time, Janet?
6 o'clock, thank you. I couldn't remember if it was 5:30 or 6. 6 o'clock, so there is time to get a bite to eat. Could I also remind you that there is, down in the School of Music on the bottom floor, there is a very good boutique brewery bar, which is comfortable and serves tasting trays of beers, as well as lots of other things to drink if you just want to have a congenial drink before you go. There are also lots of eateries from the front of the school walking down Childers Street. If you just keep going in a straight line, you will come to a very large student residence area where there are many eateries. A lot of Asian eateries there, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Malaysian eateries.
Indian?
Yes, there is an Indian restaurant down there. Yes, there is an Indian restaurant down there.
There's a question here saying, does the bus come back too?
Sorry, the bus comes back, yes. The bus does not abandon you in the wilds.
But you don't know what time the bus will come back?
I think the bus return trip goes around. It's doing a sort of circuit, and I think it comes back at 9, 8:30, something like that. Anyway, when the openings are over, that will be clear when you get on the bus. I'm not a bus marshal, and the bus marshal will make that clear to you. The other thing is also the program here. There is a map of the university campus, which actually lists, as I said this morning, things like parking. So keep that in mind for parking tomorrow. And Jane Sawyer has got a brief announcement that she'd like to make about a meeting about the Empty Bowls project for Nepal.
Thank you, Janet. And it's a great segue from India to Nepal. We want to continue the fundraising that Vippu, you would have heard about Vippu and Adriana Christensen, who made an enormous amount of money for Nepal, for Oxfam. We've actually created a pathway. We've partnered with World Crafts Council Australia and Slow Play Centre, which I'm from, in Melbourne, and we've partnered with World Crafts Council to get our money directly to the potters. We've got a relationship with Federation of Handicrafts Associations of Nepal, and those traditional potters that still make in similar ways that we were just talking about and hearing about, I should say, they've been particularly devastated, and we're having a meeting across the hallway in 10 minutes for any organisations, any one of you, whether you're in an organisation or not. I did try and email the organisations before I left Melbourne last week, but I may not have got all the addresses right. But anyone who's interested, we're hosting an Empty Bowls event at Slow Play Centre to get. We want to try and create $10,000 on that night. It's coming up in September.
You might just talk a little bit.
Yes, sorry.
People don't know what Empty Bowls are.
Oh, Empty Bowls, okay, sorry.
Yeah, some people may not.
Yes, Empty Bowls. Well, we'll talk about it at the meeting, so I don't want to lay it on everyone here, but if anyone is interested, come to the meeting across the hallway now, and we'll talk about it further. But what I'd love to do is encourage any of you, particularly if you're from a community organisation. It's a great community activity to do. We've got a band, we've got a chef, we're going to have a great night, and potters will donate a bowl, and we'll sell tickets to that event. So essentially it's something that anyone can organise, and there's a lovely history behind the Empty Bowls events, which I'll talk about across the hallway if anyone's interested. We'd love you to join us. Please come to the meeting, and if not, find me and talk about it with me, because we'd love you all to be on board, anyone who's keen. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all. See you.